Hello and welcome to the Education Officer Hustings. My name is Lucy Ferby-Stocks. I am one of the current station managers at RAW, and today I am going to be talking to the education candidates about running in the SU elections, their policies, their promises, and what they are, their main manifesto points. So first of all, I should say voting has opened. It opened on Monday, yesterday at 12, and it's closing Friday at 7. So make sure you have your say at warwicksu.com/vote. The link is going across the bottom of the stream below, so do make sure you have your say. And I am going to be talking more to the one education candidate that has managed to join me today shortly. But first of all, we have a video produced by our visual department here at RAW and with the BOR as well about voting in these SU elections and how you can do that.
Polls are opening soon. This video covers how voting works in SU elections and making your vote count. First, go to the Warwick SU website and log in using your student ID. Hover over the Student Voice tab and select the Elections option. Scroll down to the Spring Elections section, and when polls open, click Vote Now. Voting uses the Single Transferable Vote System, or STV. When voting, you rank your favourite candidate as 1, but also rank the other candidates, so that if your first choice candidate isn't selected, your vote can be transferred to your second, third, and so on. And that's how to vote. Good luck.
Yes, so that video was put together by our wonderful visual department by Jacob, otherwise known as X1, with the BOR. So do make sure you have your say at warwicksu.com/vote. So we have been talking to all the candidates for the top 7 full-time officer roles for the SU elections happening this week. And today it's for the education candidates who are running to be education officer at Warwick SU. So do make sure you check out the sports and presidential and all the other hustings that have been going on previously this week. And we have societies coming up later in the week as well as welfare, so do keep an eye on our socials for those. So we should probably get down to what you're all watching for. Obviously today we do have 3 education candidates running this year for education officer. Sadly 2 of them are unable to join me, but they have both given statements. But first of all, I'm going to introduce the one that's managed to take the time to join me today. So I would like to welcome Isabel Atkins. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So Isabel, would you like to just give us a short introduction about you, who you are, and your sort of brief policies, very briefly for me?
Yes, so I'm Isabel. I have been this is my 6th year at Warwick now. I started off doing a part-time degree, switched to politics and international studies and graduated in the middle of a pandemic last year. And I'm currently doing a master's in US foreign policy in, again, PACE, classic. I have been disabled students officer this year, and it's really embedded in me a desire to carry on a discourse with the university to improve student experience and make education accessible and equitable. And that is my manifesto promise to everyone, that I will fight my hardest for an accessible and equitable education. So this includes policies on mitigating circumstances, which are woefully inadequate. It includes getting back to in-person teaching ASAP, but also mitigating for those unable or unwilling to return to campus, because you shouldn't have to choose your safety over your education. And it's also about improving the student experience and bringing back measures that improve time at Warwick, so earlier exam timetables, better teaching provision, better study space on campus, and generally making the Warwick experience the best it can be.
Thank you ever so much for giving an idea of what you and your key policies. So also, sadly, we have 2 candidates that couldn't join us today, but I do have 2 statements prepared. So first of all, I have a statement from Agatha. She says, "Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I'm Agatha or Aggie, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a third-year English Literature student from London, and I'm standing to be your next Education Officer. Currently a Faculty of Arts representative, a third-year course rep for the ECLS SSLC, and Vice President of Warwick Arts Society. We need a students' union that listens to our voice and does right by us. My top priorities involve more communication, liberation, accessibility, and pandemic support. If elected, my top 4 goals for the year are to put more money into our library and other services, to fight against hidden course costs, to work towards more study space and social areas, to fight for a liberated and accessible education for all students, and to develop course-specific strategies that ensure a high-quality education for each individual student. Some of my other targets include fighting for students on a national level in terms of student fees and rent rebates, during a safe return to campus as soon as possible, to continue the Decolonise project, fight against the black attainment gap, other forms of academic disparities amongst students, and making sure that as Education Officer I am listening to students and supporting them, especially for students in academic positions such as faculty and SSLC reps. If you like the sound of that, please check out my manifesto on my Facebook page, Aggie for Education, and I'll try not to be too annoying on Freshers pages, and vote Aggie for Education. So that was from Agatha. I also have a statement from Joe, who sadly isn't able to make it today. Hi, I'm Joe Baird, pronouns he, him, third-year History and Politics student, Social Secretary of Warwick Labour Party, and the anti-malarkey candidate running to be your Education Officer. I'm a huge fan of music, The Simpsons, and of course, Weezer. The university, particularly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, has failed to prioritise your academic well-being, preferring instead to prioritise rent-seeking and its supposed academic reputation. I believe that I'm the right person to represent you as Education Officer. I feel I have the right qualities for the role. I aim to be inclusive and empathetic towards others. I believe I have demonstrated this in my work as Social Secretary and in my personal life through my interactions and voluntary work. I also feel that I have the right ideas for the role at this uncertain time. Vote for me, and I will fight for an education that is liberated, decolonised, and trans-inclusive. I'll fight for an education that is of a high standard, aiming to diversify assessment and increase to more accessible study spaces. I work for an education that accounts for your mental health and by lobbying to maintain a number of self-certifications even after the pandemic. An education that is free of unnecessary costs, support for rent strikers, and the subversion of hidden costs by, for example, providing free printing credits. And finally, I will aim for the swift reopening of the library whilst campaigning for a safety net, acknowledging that even when we return to campus, that alone will not make up for the damage to our studies and well-being done by this period of restricted access under lockdown. Vote Red for education, vote education, not exploitation. Thank you. So that are 2 statements from 2 candidates that sadly aren't able to make it with us today, Agatha and Joe. But I am, in the meantime, still joined by Isabel to talk through some questions that we have for the hustings. So, Isabel, first of all, I should really start off with one blanket question. Why are you suitable to be the next Education Officer of Warwick SU?
So I have a unique background when it comes to education. I missed a lot of school when I was younger due to ill health, and I have 4 GCSEs to my name, and that's it. So I came to Warwick through the Centre for Lifelong Learning, which is a woefully under-recognised department that does fantastic work for increasing accessibility to education. I did my degree part-time. I started on the social studies programme, focusing on politics, and then transferred into PACE, where I graduated. So I understand what it's like to be an atypical student in Warwick. So not your typical 18-year-old fresher that's doing a full-time course, that's living on campus. And my experience has really embedded in me this desire to continue to advocate for these atypical routes and increase accessibility. So working with the CLL to increase recognition of its 2+2 programs, its degree apprenticeship programs, and really incorporate these into the education experience. And I think my experience in that personally will make me a much stronger advocate for them. I've been advocating this year strongly as Disabled Students Officer. It's been an interesting year, to say the least. I think most people agree with me on that one. and it's been a very hard fight. I've made decisions that not everyone's agree with, but unfortunately that's the nature of the role, that there will be people I let down, and for those I'm sorry, but at the same time there are people who I know that I've really helped in my pursuit of an equitable education. So I've fought for mental health training for personal tutors, I've fought for disability disclosure guidance, I sit on the mitigating circumstances and self-cert portal development team, and I've really sought to bring the provisions the students need in this year, despite the pandemic.
Lovely, thank you. So you've talked about why you would be suitable, but what is your top priority as education officer? Day one in the office, what is the first thing you want to be able to do?
Well, I hope by August we will be, prepared, starting to prepare to go back to in-person teaching. I think most people are ready to return to campus, and I think overall that is what will make education as equitable as possible. I think the last year has really chalked up some severe discrepancies in how students learn, and I'm hoping by that point we'll be back, so I won't need to be advocating for a return to in-person teaching. But if we aren't, that is my position. I maintain that that is the way forward. But I'll also be working to make sure that students that can't come back or won't come back aren't adversely affected by that decision, to prioritise their safety over their education. It's not a choice anyone should make, and the situation we're in unfortunately necessarily dictates that. But I strongly believe that I'm an advocate to fight these corners for students, so that's my first priority, is getting back to in-person teaching.
Okay, thank you. So obviously you made reference to COVID there. We can't not do a live stream and not talk about COVID in any sense of the word. It would be quite nice if we didn't have to, but sadly we do. So obviously COVID-19 has disrupted learning considerably over the past year. It's affected everyone within the Warwick community. So how are you planning on tackling the effects of this, as some of them are very far reaching and one word that the government has liked over the past year, unprecedented?
Oh, that word. So I do want to increase the robustness of the mitigating circumstances procedures. I think they're still very vague. They're very subjective. I don't think just telling tutors to take into account the potential effects of COVID is sufficient. I want to make them clearer. I want to issue guidance to all students about what they can expect from the process, which at the moment it isn't. It's a very opaque process that unfortunately leaves a lot of students behind. I've been fighting for an equitable education over the past 6 months, because I know that COVID has had a horrible effect on students' education. People just don't learn well sitting alone in their bedrooms. And that's for your every man student, and it's even more for minority groups, those who have additional caring responsibilities, jobs, disabilities. These are all even further impacted by the effects of COVID. So I want to be an advocate for these students in particular, to make sure that we are raising everyone up, and levelling the whole Warwick population up as we come out of COVID, and learn from this pandemic.
So obviously, following on from that, if the COVID situation improves by term 1 of next year, what should the return to teaching look like for you? What would, as education officer, what would the return to teaching look like for you?
I think hopefully, given the lockdown plan that was released yesterday, it will be all in person. So seminars, labs, lectures where possible. I appreciate there are significant space constraints with those, if social distancing is still in place. But I do believe students learn best in person, and I think most people will agree with me on that. And that we should be emphasising small group teaching in particular, to make sure people are really making the most of their education. I'm hoping the social events will return, and I think that's a really important thing as well, to get that one hell of a party that Stuart Croft promised. But the past year has really had an impact on mental well-being as well, and that's again a big part of my manifesto pledge, is to continue to lobby the university to ensure no more cuts to wellbeing services, to roll out my piloted mental health training for personal tutors to all teaching staff, to ensure that they are sufficiently trained in the issues that are affecting students. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. So obviously another thing that has been very prominent within the SU over the past year specifically is the decolonisation project. So this has been pursued heavily by the SU. So how would you plan as the, if you were elected as a new education officer, as furthering this and continuing this work?
So I want to review its successes. I think it's been a fantastic project, and it's made a really significant change in attitude in certain departments. But I think we need to assess where it is, and I work with the decolonise manager in the SU to review its current offering, and its successes and perhaps its strengths. I think there are certain departments that are more reluctant to uptake decolonisation than others. You know, history, sociology come to mind for really good representation of the decolonise project in its curriculum. But I think particularly STEM is woefully lacking in its willingness to decolonise. So I think nominating senior staff in each department to contact, I think it's being left to be a passion project for certain staff, and that's not fair. I think we need to significantly embed it throughout all faculties to ensure it's getting the representation it deserves in faculty and department level policy.
Lovely, thank you. So again, another issue which always comes to the fore during elections, no matter the time of year, and specifically in light of COVID, is mitigation and extension. So how do you think the current mitigation and extension policies could be improved at the University of Warwick?
So obviously I want to make them more transparent. I would like robust criteria published in advance. I want reports given to all students who apply for mitigation. I've sat on the self-certification development committee in how language is communicated to students around self-certification. And I believe that these need to remain in place. Going forward, I think COVID will have had a significant impact on how students are able to cope with certain issues, and leaving these in place is an additional level of support that I think is needed. And I think building that trust is really important as well. There's a lot of skepticism, I think, from teaching staff that students are taking the mickey, or it's a case of poor time management is one I hear a lot. And I've had to say before, you know, at the end of the day, we're living through a pandemic, and these self-certifications are a lifeline for students, and keeping these in place is a significant priority of mine, to advocate for what is best for students going forward.
Lovely, thank you. So obviously you talk about making staff and the university aware, but obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, as you say, has highlighted the importance of mitigation and extensions for students. But how do you plan on improving communication with students themselves, making sure they are more aware of what is available and accessible to them during times when things aren't always, life isn't going exactly to plan?
So I hope to hold bi-termly, so twice termly, education surgeries where I'll make myself available to not only students but SSLC reps, faculty reps, to ensure their academic problems are being heard, and be able to give advice. I think being an approachable person is helpful as well, being able to just be dropped an email if students are having problems, so I could best advocate for them, both in specific and general contexts. Building that communication, that rapport with students is really important to me. And I think that comes as well from building trust within the SU. A lot of people don't know the SU exists. Too many people know the SU doesn't exist. And increasing its standing within the university and increasing its relationship and improving its relationship with the university as well is really important, to ensure we're best serving the needs of students.
Lovely, thank you. So again, can't talk to someone who's wanted to be education officer without talking about timetables, specifically exam timetables. As a Warwick, these sort of have a bit of an infamous reputation. So they always come up during these elections, and I don't think they'll probably go away anytime soon. So what are your views on the university's timetable policy? And if you would make any improvements, how would you do so?
It's a bit crap, isn't it, at the moment? The fact we're being left till Easter holidays to be told when our exams are is completely ridiculous. It's an abysmal front from the university. I'll lobby for a earlier release, so a term 2 release, hopefully beginning of term 2. So after Christmas, when students have had a bit of a break, they can start looking forward to term 2, which everyone knows always picks up in pace. And then looking over Easter, so they're prepared and they can manage their time better. So we have less of those poor excuses from tutors that students need to manage their time better. Because how can we, when we don't know when our exams are going to be until about 3, potentially 4 weeks before them? So that's a classic problem that always comes up. But I'm hoping with the changes this year that have been implemented, that the university will be a lot more receptive to change. And that's what I'm hoping will come out of this pandemic generally, that perhaps the things that they didn't think previously possible this year has shown them can be.
Lovely, thank you. So lastly, some students say they feel out of touch with their elected officers, that they're just sort of working in the SU and aren't representative of students. So this has been something that's sort of been around campus for years now. So how would you make yourself accessible to the average student if you were elected as the new education officer?
So I want to build trust in the SU again. I think this year has been a particularly difficult year, and I think a lot of people know my stance on the online teaching campaign that ran in September. I didn't support it. I believed that we needed to consult students, particularly disabled students, in my role as DSO, to best advocate for their needs. And this didn't necessarily go down well with certain people, which I appreciate. You know, differing opinions will inevitably cause conflict, but I hope to build on this reputation going forward, that I am a strong believer in consultation and representation with consultation, and that being a voice and a reasonable voice for students, and acting in a way that they can see is transparent and is in accordance with their beliefs and with their desires for their education, will hopefully encourage students to participate more in the SU, not only in democracy, but in societies and sports teams, and in faculty representation as well. And I think building that rapport is really important, embedding trust back in the SU.
Lovely. Thank you for taking the time to answer our questions today. I'm sad, obviously, again, Joe and Agatha weren't able to make it, but again, thank you for being able to reach us today. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. I would like to take the opportunity to remind everyone, obviously, the votes are open. Votes opened on Monday, yesterday at 12 o'clock, and will be open till 7 o'clock on Friday night, where then after that we will be having a big decision results reveal on Friday evening. It will be live streamed. I will probably be there in some way, shape or form with a few other members of RAW. So we will be presenting the results live from 9 o'clock. So do make sure to keep an eye out for that. But again, do vote at warwicksu.com/vote. And also we RAW are running an exit poll. So do have your say after you've voted. Do put your preferences down in there so we can sort of have a go at trying to predict what you have decided to, who you have decided to elect this year. So thank you ever so much for taking the time to watch us today. All our streams later in the week, we've got welfare, we've got societies coming up later this week, so do keep an eye out for those. But again, I'd like to take the opportunity again to remind you to vote, warwicksu.com/vote. So thank you for watching today, and I'm sure we will see you soon.